When was the last time you made pickles? Well, if you're like most folks, probably never. Supermarket pickles are convenient, but homemade are so much better, and they don't have to take weeks to make. So Dan is here to show us how to make classic bread and butter pickles that come together in only 2 days, right?
That's right.
We're
going to be here for 2 days making these. No, but the hands-on stuff is actually not that bad at all.
Okay.
We're using 2 pounds of small Kirby pickling cucumbers, really good crunch to them. The first thing we're going to look at is how you prep them. And so we looked at a lot of resources, the USDA being a big one. And the USDA recommends to take off this blossom end because there's an enzyme in there that can soften the pickles over time. So you want to get rid of that. Sometimes they don't have the stem on here, so it's a little tricky to figure out which is which. What we like to do is just take off both sides just to be sure. And you don't need to take off a lot. 1/16 of an inch is fine. So then we're just going to cut these into 1/4 inch slices. So a nice grip on there. Take your time. It's a good time to practice your knife skills. If they're a little thick or too thin, it's not the end of the world.
And we prefer those small Kirby cucumbers for a few reasons. They're small, so they fit into the jars. Larger cucumbers have bigger seeds. Those seeds can start to separate away from the flesh of the cucumber, and eventually the cucumber itself can fall into pieces as they are being pickled. Finally, fresh is best. Buy the freshest cucumbers that you can find. The fresher they are, the firmer their pectin is. And firmer cucumbers mean crisper pickles.
All right, so I just got those last few done there. We can stop there if we want, right? We could just do cucumbers.
I don't want to.
You don't want to. You never want to just stop there. So we really like adding other ingredients that provide flavor, but then also take up the flavor of the brine, and then they're delicious on their own. So we're gonna start with an onion right here, and I'm gonna 1/4 this and then slice it really thin. Add this to my bowl. Okay, so next up, red bell pepper. Nice flavor, good sweetness, which works with the sweet brine we're gonna do, but also that burst of color in there is nice. So I'm just gonna take the top off and the bottom and slice down the sides. We wanna leave those seeds and ribs behind, and I like taking it off this way as opposed to kind of opening it up and then trying to take off. So you have all that there. And then we're just gonna do little matchsticks on these guys. All right, so now time to add the salt. So salt is really important, obviously for flavor, but it also is gonna draw a lot of moisture out of these vegetables. We're using something called canning and pickling salt, which is really just pure salt. So if you have a kosher salt that is also just pure salt, that's fine as well. You wanna avoid ones that have anti-caking agents in them or iodine, anything like that. They can make your brine really cloudy instead of clear. So you don't get to see those beautiful cucumbers and all that stuff in there. So this is 2 tablespoons of canning and pickling salt. And I'm just gonna use my hands, just get in there, mix it up. So this needs to sit in the fridge for about 3 hours. We'll get tons of moisture out, and then we're gonna drain that away.
Okay.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'm gonna wash my hands up. You can pop that in that low boy over there.
Sounds good.
So now we're gonna talk about the jars that we're gonna use for this. So these are canning jars. They're 1 pint each, so we're gonna do 4 of them. We also have our nice large pot over here and our rack in the bottom. Now the rack is important. We're gonna put these jars in here. We don't want them to sit right on the bottom. When this comes up to a boil, they'll start to wiggle and they can crack. So I'm gonna fill this up with water, and we just wanna cover them. Okay, so now we're gonna move over to the stove.
Sure you don't need me to get that?
Well, if I fall, I'm gonna need you to pick me up. So we're gonna bring this up to a simmer over medium-high heat, and then we're gonna turn it off, put the cover on, and leave it just to stay warm. And you'll notice that we're not sterilizing the jars in this recipe. A lot of them do, but you only really need to do it if you're processing for less than 10 minutes. That's USDA guidelines. We're gonna process for longer than that, so we're not worried about it. So the canning water came up to a simmer, turned off the heat and covered it, and we're just gonna let those jars sit and stay nice and warm. So now we're gonna turn our focus to the brine. We're gonna start with 3 cups of apple cider vinegar, a little more flavor than just regular white distilled. And to that, we're gonna add 2 cups of granulated white sugar. So it looks like a lot. Trust me, there's a lot less than you saw in a lot of recipes. We found a lot of recipes were syrupy sweet, just way too much sugar. We find that's also the case with a lot of store-bought pickles. We also have a cup of water. If it's straight vinegar, it ends up just being too much. Okay, now for our spices. Now you can buy pickling blend. We really like doing it ourselves, so we can pick and choose exactly what we want. So we've got a tablespoon of yellow mustard seeds. This is very classic for bread and butter pickles. We also have 3/4 of a teaspoon of turmeric. Now this obviously provides some flavor, but it really is all about that color. That's key. 1/2 teaspoon of celery seeds, which are really savory, ton of flavor in there. We love those for pickles. And finally, 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground clove. Make sure you measure this accurately. Clove can be really, really strong, so you only want 1/4 of a teaspoon in there. So I'm gonna bring this up to a boil over medium-high heat, and then we're gonna cover it, put it off to the side. Heating it up helps to dissolve all that sugar, really bloom those spices as well. So these have sat for 3 hours in the fridge. We're gonna drain them in this colander over here.
Oh, yeah.
See that? That would make some watery pickles. So I'm not gonna rinse them off. The salt that we added, we want that to be in there because it's really important for seasoning. So I'm just giving them a good shake, get that water to drip out. I have some paper towels. I'm gonna go in and just make sure I get any surface moisture off. We want them to be really nice and dry. And now it is assembly time,
Okay.
which is the most fun part of pickling, I think. So we're gonna come over here and we're gonna grab our jars out. Now, if you have really good pain tolerance, you could do this with your hands, or you can use the rack that we have in there, but I really like using these.
Okay.
And the spring-loaded ones are awesome. They're like spring-loaded, gardening shears.
Sure.
A lot easier in your hands. So they open and close, and they grab right onto the top of the jar really easily. They don't slip off. I've seen people try this with tongs.
Yes.
And it can be really bad.
I've tried them with tongs a few times, yes, and it's can catastrophes, right?
Well, I didn't want to say that the person I saw do it with tongs was you,
Oh.
but you just cop to it. So you want to do that, just drain it out, bring it over here. We're going to turn them upside down on the towel. All right, these are nice and dry, so we'll flip them over. I mentioned there's a lot of ways to make sure these are really crispy. Here's another one. So we're actually using something called Pickle Crisp, which is from Ball. It's just calcium chloride, essentially, and we're going to put 1/8 of a teaspoon in each one. We're measuring it into each jar so we know for certain that it has it in there. If we were to put it in our brine and then maybe not use all of it, you don't know exactly how much ends up in there.
Very smart.
So now it's time to fill them, and I was hoping you would help me with it.
All
Got
right.
the pickles here. You can use this funnel or do it without. I'll do it without. I'll do the
Okay.
harder one. You do this funnel, and we're just going to pack all these vegetables in. You don't have to do too firmly,
All right.
but you want it to be nice and full.
And we're using these amazing tools.
We're going to use
Found
our
at
hands.
the end of our arms.
Exactly, yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, at this point, we don't have to worry about, I don't know what's been on your hands, but we don't have to worry about it too much because we are going to go through the processing time.
We are using very clean hands, though.
We are.
Clean hands, America.
Yes.
Oh, I like this funnel.
All right, so we want to make sure we got a pretty even amount in all of them there. So now it's time to add our brine to it. So I'm going to just bring this back to a boil real briefly.
Oh, it smells so good.
Smells good, right?
Smells like pickles.
Yes. And this funnel also comes in a lot of handy when you're adding that brine in. So just going to ladle this over the top. What we're doing here is called a raw pack, where we have the vegetables that are raw and we're adding hot brine on top. A hot pack is when everything is heated together. So we're gonna leave a 1/2 inch headspace in each one. If you have too much air in there, you don't get a good proper seal. And now what we're gonna do is actually run the skewer around in here to dislodge air bubbles. So this is all about headspace. If we don't dislodge it now, we think we have a certain level, but then as it heats up, those bubbles rise to the surface and it totally changes. Okay. So there's a lot of air bubbles. So this one is a little low now that we've gotten that air out of there, so I'm gonna add it up just to that first ridge on the jar. That's a great indicator of about a 1/2 inch. Now these are nice and warm, they're packed. We're gonna wipe the rims nice and clean. The next thing are the lids. Now you wanna use new lids every single time. You can reuse the rings, they're fine, but we really count on this seal to hold. So you need to use fresh ones every time. And that goes right on top, and then the rings go on. This is where it's really important to pay attention to how much force you're using to twist it on. We call it fingertip tight. It's
Okay.
really important that you allow enough space, just enough space that air can escape during the canning process. And that is actually what lowers the pressure inside here so that you form a vacuum and it pops in once you're done with it, once you take it out of the hot water. So we're gonna go on, just fingertip tight, just like that. Before we put them in the canner, we wanna make sure the water is still nice and warm, between 120 and 140 degrees. So I'm gonna use my trusty jar lifter again, and we'll add them right back to the pot. It's important to have about 1 inch of water on top of these. We're gonna bring this up to 185 degrees, and we're gonna process it for 30 minutes at that temperature.
That's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing.
All right, sounds easy.
Yep.
Well, how do we can cucumbers without making them mushy? The cells inside a cucumber contain pectin, which is what gives the pickle structure and keeps it firm and crispy. Now, pectin breaks down above 185 degrees, so the traditional canning method makes for mushy pickles. Instead, a low-temp hot water bath of a temperature between 180 to 185 degrees is perfect.
Bridget, look what we made.
I love these. They're so beautiful. And 2 days,
That's it.
that's all it took. 2 days, folks. Make your own pickles.
So these have cooled for 24 hours. The last step before we actually eat them is to check the seal. So they're always gonna look good when you have the ring on. You gotta get rid of the ring, and you wanna feel around and make sure that it's very tight. We really want this to be indented here. That means that we formed a successful vacuum, it pulled it in, and it formed a really good seal with this rubber gasket. So this is nice and tight, we're good to go. Now I'm just gonna use my fingers here to pop it open.
Oh, it's a good sound.
It is a good sound. You definitely want to hear that. And I'll serve you some pickles. Make sure you get some red pepper here as well. That was crunchy, huh?
And that brine, it's not too sweet.
It's not too sweet. That's the biggest thing. It stands out right away because you're so used to bread and butter pickles being syrupy, candy-like.
The only thing that would make these better is a giant, giant sandwich of pulled pork.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew I was going to let you down. Made the pickles, forgot the meat and bread underneath it.
This almost makes me forget that pork.
Okay.
How's that? Is that
All right,
good
that's
enough?
good. Yeah, that's fine. Redemption.
So the next time you pick a peck of pickled peppers, can them yourself. Start your bread and butter pickles by tossing sliced Kirby cukes with onions, peppers, and salt to draw out excess water. The secret to keeping them crisp is a product called Pickle Crisp. Then pour a tart, sweet but not too sweet brine over the vegetables, process the jars, and cool. 24 hours later, it's pickle time. So from our test kitchen to your kitchen, a quick and easy recipe for the best bread and butter pickles.
Thanks for watching America's Test Kitchen. What'd you think?
Well, leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or you can just say hello.
You can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
I'll see you later.